So I'm going to name a bunch of different everyday situations. And if I name one that applies to you, raise your hand, and then you can put it back down. So who has a box of things that you haven't opened in more than 5 years? Okay. Who has bought something at a yard sale or church fair that you later sold at a yard sale or a church fair? Who bought a car that you didn't like 6 months later? Who's bought exercise equipment that now serves a decorative or storage function? Who owns more than 10 books you've never read? Have you got anything in your closet more than a year old with the tag still on it? Oh yeah. How about a power tool you've never actually used on a project? Ever needed a vacation from your vacation? Who's got an object in your house that you have specifically kept because you know it must go to something, but you are not sure what? I have a whole box designated for that. Who's bought something that you really didn't want just because somebody else thought you should? So there are lots more things along that line that we could talk about, but I took you through that so that you can hear the question that God asks at the beginning of Isaiah 55. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? The question isn't asked in judgment, but in bewilderment. What are you people doing? Asks God. Why would you buy things that don't nourish you or feed your soul? Why would you work so hard for something that leaves you cold? You work 24/7 so you can get more money, and you throw away all that money on stuff that leaves you harried and anxious, tired and unsatisfied. Why? God is completely baffled by our behavior. The prophets are always pointing out things like that. From our own folly and foibles to the corruption and injustice that so easily takes root while we're chasing after the next shiny object that never satisfies us once we get it. We now have billion-dollar industries focused entirely on convincing us that we will somehow be lesser human beings if we don't buy this thing or experience or drug that we almost certainly don't need and likely never wanted until the ad campaign convinced us that we absolutely had to have it. We fall for it every single time, and have been falling for it since well before the prophet Isaiah pointed it out in the 8th century before Christ. What the prophets throw in our faces, Jesus likes to point out in parables. And the one I think that's closest to making Isaiah's point is the one that Robbie just so brilliantly read about the father who had 2 sons, generally known as the parable of the prodigal son. The main point of the parable is about the unconditional love of the dad, who's the God figure in the story. And in context, the parable is the capstone to 3 parables about lost things: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and finally the lost son, are all in Luke 15. And Luke 15 is known as the lost chapter because of that. But that sort of adjacent story of the 2 brothers in the parable is also quite rich, as it's often easier to see ourselves in one or both of them than in the father. By focusing on the brothers, we can gain insight about how we ourselves can become lost in the first place. And it's in the actions and attitudes of these 2 young men that we find the folly of our quest for satisfaction in things outside of ourselves. In both the Isaiah passage and the passage about the prodigal, or lost son, the driving need is nourishment. It's when a famine strikes and the prodigal finds himself hungry and he's already down to feeding the pigs because he'd blown all his money, that he remembers that he had nourishment once in his father's house. He returns home because he is literally starving. Isaiah is warning the people that they are headed down the same road as the prodigal. They're not being nourished. They're spiritually starving in the midst of the abundance that God has provided. Both of the brothers in the parable live in the same house. At the beginning, the elder brother appears to be quite satisfied with his lot, but the younger brother is not. He has wanderlust. There's greener grass somewhere, and like so many, he wants to go find it. The family has means, they have servants, and the youngest son has such a sense of entitlement that he stomps all over the taboos of the day and demands his share of the family inheritance, while his father is very much still alive. He's not content to wait out his father's lifetime to receive what he did not earn. There's money that will come to him, and he wants it now. In a shocking move that some would call extremely gracious and others would call enabling, the father gives it to him. And not only that, splits it and gives it to the elder brother as well. And off goes the younger brother. No doubt, Dad knew how this would likely end up. His son had had no experience managing either money or his own appetites, and he's blown the whole thing in short order and is down to take a menial job slopping pigs. And then he's already as low as he can get. He finds himself envious of what the pigs get to eat. And with no money left and no food for himself, it begins to dawn on him that, I had it pretty good back at home. He knows that he was wrong now. Not only is he's of course concerned that he doesn't have anything to eat, but he's also clearly done some soul searching. He recognizes that he has sinned. He recognizes that he has harmed his father. And he knows that the insult that he gave to his father by asking for his inheritance early was unlikely to be forgiven. He basically wished his father dead and saw him as sort of a useless old relic, live out your life, but give me the money now, Dad. So he's not going back to make demands this time because he understands he's been in the wrong. Instead, he decides he's going to go back and see if he can at least get a job as a servant in his father's household. He's given up his sense of entitlement. Now, we might think the elder brother here is a better son. He's not insulted his father. He appears to be satisfied with his lot. And now that he got his half of the inheritance too, he literally does have everything there at home, at least materially speaking. But all of that is upended when the family comes back together and his brother comes home. Unlike me, he was not really pleased. Well, he might have been okay to see his brother, but he wanted to see his brother get raked over the coals. He wanted to see his brother pay for what he had done, for the way he had insulted the family, for the way that he had blown all of that money. So when Dad greets the younger brother, who sees him outside the window and goes running to meet him, wraps his arms around him, fully forgives him, and then throws this huge feast for him with gifts and all kinds of things, now it's the elder brother's turn to be unsatisfied with his condition. we see now that the older brother has been grading on a curve. He's been satisfied because as the eldest, he's gotten all the perks of the position in an ancient patriarchal culture. His brother got his share of the inheritance, he got his, and likely his share was probably more. Life was good, he would wait it out. But now that his kid brother is getting rewarded for his bad behavior with feasts and gifts, the trade-off isn't looking so good anymore. And he says to his dad, "Hey, you never threw a big feast for me." And Dad is kind of bewildered. He could have had a party whenever he wanted. He apparently never asked. He could have whatever gifts he wanted. Why shouldn't there be a celebration of his brother who's come to his senses and realized the value of the non-material things he gave up when he went in search of greener pastures? That what could be had in the community that he had at home, even if he experienced it as a servant and not as a son, was far greater. The only person in the parable who's actually satisfied from beginning to end is the father. While he was likely deeply disappointed in his youngest son's initial choice, he didn't fight it. He let it be, hoping that his son would come to learn what really mattered and come home. He also didn't fight him when he came back. He didn't try to make him pay. The father was satisfied the entire time, even through great offense and sorrow, because he was grounded in what really mattered, the loving relationship. The father was then saddened by his older son, who showed that he didn't yet know what his younger brother had learned on his adventures. But again, the father didn't fight his oldest son. He tried to assure the elder brother of the unconditional loving relationship that surrounded him, but it would be left to some future story or some future time for that brother to learn that it's the loving relationship that satisfies and nothing else. That's also the promise of Isaiah 55. "Listen carefully to me," the prophet said, "and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food." And what is that rich food, we might ask? The next verse has the answer. "Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David." Remember that covenant is the way that family relationship is extended to others. The chapter goes on to say that all nations will run towards that loving covenant. And it reminds the people that God's ways are not like human ways, just as the God figure in the parable of the lost son is concerned with different things than that which concerns the two brothers. The loving provision that goes out from God's abundance, seed to the sower and bread to the eater, will result not only in human joy and peace, but also, the prophet says, "The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress, instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle, and it shall be to the Lord for a memorial, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off." Wholeness for the earth and all that is in it, if we can set aside our ways of trying to gain and achieve more and more, and find our satisfaction in loving relationship with one another and the earth that provides the conduit for God's abundance to us. Isaiah is recalling the curse in Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden for their unwillingness simply to refrain from one kind of fruit in the garden. "You can have all of this, except this one tree." Adam and Eve are like, "Nope, all of it. We're taking it all." As a result, God says to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Isaiah 55 offers a way out of all of that. No more sweating to eat bread from the ground that only produces thorns and thistles. "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come and buy and drink. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David." But to get there, we have to come to the point of the lost son and realize that we've been chasing after all the wrong things. It's not about how hard we work. If we're working for the wrong things, we're going to get thorns and thistles. But if we're working to create a beloved community of unconditional loving relationship, we no longer have to sweat. Then we're working with the earth instead of against it. The mountains will sing and the trees will clap, and those thorns and briar patches will turn to cypress and myrtle. Joy and peace lie in that way, the way that doesn't cost a dime, because love doesn't cost a dime. And the good news is that Crawford gets that. Last week, we had guests to celebrate the new fire pit. And for several of them, last Sunday was the first time in their entire lives that they had attended a church service of any kind. They literally had not set foot in a church for anything other than being a tourist and going into a famous church to see what it was. As we cooked s'mores and talked around the fire pit after worship last week, one woman was sharing her experience of church with me and trying to make sense of what this thing was that she had just been part of. And then a light bulb went off. "It seems like it's about community," she said. And then she went further, "And what we provided in the fire pit is another place for that community to happen." I wanted to go dance around the fire pit. I mean, for all our angst and our woes, for all of our worries about our budget deficit and staff openings and other concerns, what exists here is the core of what matters. People who had no experience or expectations one way or the other of church came out of last week's service and said, "Oh, so it's about community. Good job, Crawford." The rich food that will bring joy and peace and satisfaction is to be found in cultivating the seeds of loving community that we have here. Love and inclusion and welcome, that is the wine and milk that we can offer without money and without price. In here, out under the tent, at the fair, at Town Day, wherever we are, because we are the church wherever we go. If we can keep it up and grow those seeds, we shall go out with joy and be led back in peace. And we will be satisfied just as we are. Amen.